Hi, and welcome back to the Flow Show. I'm Joanna Turner, intuitive business mentor, and I am looking forward to today's episode. It feels like there's an important message in here, and we're going to do another Akashic case study. And first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a little bit more of my grid work journey in the very current moment, as opposed to an older story. So this is actually the 1st of March we're recording this on, and I have a story from the 22nd of February, so 22-2. So I was actually going on a date. Don't get too excited, it didn't work out. But I was pulled much further out of my normal routine or my normal area that I live in to go on this date. That is also very unusual. Normally, I wouldn't travel super far to go meet somebody, but everything was lining up. It seemed like a really good idea. He lived quite far out of town because he's a farmer, and I agreed to meet him halfway. So I was happy to do that for our first date. And as I glance over at the clock today, it is 4:44 p.m. while I'm recording this. Oh my goodness. So I'm just loving all of these little synchronicities and pieces that are lining up. It's just, honestly, it's just confirmation for me when these things happen. But so I didn't really think anything of this in terms of grid work as we were organizing it or anything else. I just thought, I'm going to meet this guy. He seems really nice, and we're meeting halfway. There really was no further thought process in it for me anyway, and that worked for both of us. So even though he did invite me back to his farm, I thought, for a first date, that is a bit hectic. So we decided to meet on the side of Loch Lomond, and that there's lots of little places to stop and places to get coffee and all that kind of stuff. So it was perfect. And on my way, as I'm driving up Loch Lomond, I look at the clock and it is 11:11 on the clock. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then I thought, wait, what day is this? Hang on, it's 22-2. And I thought, I wonder if that's suspicious in some way. I'm always sort of invited to these places or taken out of my sort of routine or rhythm on these auspicious days or at specific times for the energy. And it wasn't until I got home after the date, I'm afraid to say it did not go particularly well. It was fine, but I just got the vibe that by the time we even sat down in the cafe that he'd made his decision that this was not the thing. So we chatted for like an hour and went our separate ways. And that was that. So, and another piece I'll tell you about that. Anyway, it was actually very interesting because as we sat down, he opened the door of the cafe and, let me walk in ahead of him. And I was like, oh, that's nice. But we sat down directly opposite each other, and I was faced directly towards him, but we were at a table with 4 chairs. And he actually put his feet, he was quite a tall guy, and he put his feet on the chair next to him in the cafe. Now that might have been more comfortable for him, but it meant that his entire torso and his feet were all facing away from me. And if you know anything about body language, and that's something I actually teach in the Akashic Records level 2, a little bit about client body language and body language, is that when somebody wants to be there, if you're in a social setting or at casual drinks or at networking or whatever, if you're in a room, your feet are pointing where you want to go. Your feet are pointing at the person you want to be with. So if you're, in this social setting, look at people's feet and you will know where they want to be. Right? But in his case, interestingly, his whole body was like basically pivoted towards the exit, just about. Well, his back was to the exit, but he definitely was not into it as soon as we sat down. I don't know why. I don't know what happened between the car park and the cafe, but that doesn't really matter. And I just trust that the reason I was supposed to be there was more for the planetary grid work thing. And by the time I got home, I Googled the ley lines of Scotland again, and I found that Loch Lomond is actually a very potent energetic spot. I think there's like a vortex, and I was like, oh, of course. So it wasn't really about the date, it wasn't really about the guy, it wasn't really about him not really being into it or whatever. It didn't really matter. It was all about me having to be there at that point, at that time, and bring my energy there. So as soon as I had that, I was like, oh, I get it. And I hadn't heard from him, which I was not shocked about. But I thought, what am I doing? And I spotted a pattern. So the pattern for me was, even though I knew it wasn't a thing, I didn't have any vibes. I wasn't feeling it either. And if he had messaged me and said, oh my gosh, I had the best time ever, can I see you again? I don't think I would have said yes, because I was like, that's not how I want to feel if I'm with somebody that I like. So it was a no from me as much as it was an energetic no from him as well. And I hadn't heard from him. I thought, I wonder if he's so awkward. You know, he wasn't that long divorced. I thought, is he so awkward that he's just going to ghost me? I don't know. So I thought, wait, I don't need to wait for him to reject me. What am I even doing? Like, I don't need to wait and see if he likes me after all, even if I don't want to see him again. And so I thought, I can just take matters into my own hands and send him a quick message, because we had good chat. And I just said, hey, like, such a shame the vibes weren't there. Good luck with everything you do. And just left it at that. And he got back to me pretty quickly and said, such a shame, good luck. And that was that. So, and it felt so good. And I was like, I don't need to wait till tomorrow for a week. And, you know, not like that he hasn't messaged or ghosted. I was like, I can take this into my own hands, because it's up to me as well. I was like, I don't even want to see him again. Why would I even be bothered by this? Anyway, that is a total random aside. But anyway, I was very proud of myself, and it felt like a good step towards taking my power back. It's just these little patterns. You're like, I'm an empowered woman, and da da da. Anyway, that felt good. So, and very adult as well. I was like, we don't need to be ghosting people. I'm too old for that. Too old for that. Anyway, another random thing some pieces of the puzzle that are falling into place as well. When I came home, I mentioned in the beginning of the last episode that I had gone to see my sister on the new moon. But on my way home, I discovered when I was Googling the planetary grid works of Scotland, I discovered that on the way home from my sister's on that energetic weekend, I had taken a different route than I always take. So I usually go straight into the centre of Glasgow and shoot out on the M8, which is the way I have driven through to Edinburgh and all the way home, the same route for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. As long as I've been driving and going in that direction, I have always gone over we call it the Kingston Bridge, and through the centre of town. And I chose to not go that way. So that was fine. And I took a cut down another motorway, and I thought, I'm going to just sort of go, and I skirted around the south of the city, which seems like a good idea, but I don't really know it that well. I don't really know where I'm going. I was like, I'll just follow my GPS, see what happens. And it wasn't until I got home, or it wasn't until I was Googling the grid work, I was like, oh my goodness, this place, the road that this motorway along the south side takes me actually took me right over another energetic certain point that I didn't even know was there. And I was like, oh my goodness, so I'm being drawn to that area. And then I connected with this lovely lady on Facebook who is just, I don't know, I guess in this industry. She's an online coach, but she lives in Glasgow. And I was like, oh, cool. And she's like, let's meet up for lunch or a coffee. I said, brilliant. And lo and behold, we're going back to that she lives very close to that energy point again. And I've not gone to that place in years and years and years. It's just not been somewhere I've felt pulled to. And yet I'm going back there again to go and meet this lady for lunch in a couple of weeks. So I just thought that was really interesting. And then I had another aha. So my friend has invited me to Sweden in April to go and stay in her new cottage that she has manifested. It's beautiful, north of Stockholm, and she's got land and she's going to grow her own veggies and get a dog. And like, she moved in, she just got the keys last week, and she's been sort of painting and making it her own, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. Really sort of like the dream little witchy cottage in the woods. She's so happy and it suits her down to the ground, and I'm so happy for her. And I was a little bit, so we discussed dates and what worked, and I was a wee bit disappointed because it wasn't a full moon or a new moon or something. And I thought, well, that's not very auspicious. But I'll go anyway. I thought maybe there is some reason I'm supposed to be there. But I was like, no, should I be trying to go on a different date that's more energetic? And then I was listening to Pam Gregory today, one of my favorite astrologers, and she's just put out a new video all about the specific strong energies of April the 20th, which is exactly the weekend I'm going to be at my friend's house. And it is wild energy. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm still supposed to be there on a special day, and that it's just not a full moon or a new moon. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. For me, anyway, on my weird and wonderful planetary grid work journey. But anyway, I digress. But that is just my awarenesses that are happening sort of in real time. The other thing that happened in real time, obviously I did a bit of an Akashic Records case study for you from a client. That was a couple of years ago, but I just loved the example of having the past life in the Titanic, because it's something we can all sort of imagine, but also it's kind of weird and a bit out there, but it's wonderful. And what a massive impact it was having on her life. And there was a guy actually commented on my YouTube video of the podcast that he also does past life regressions for people. And he had found people he'd taken people back to the Titanic as well. But the energy that he had experienced with that was people feeling trapped and overwhelmed in their lives. So I thought that was really interesting. And it's obviously these people were maybe trapped as the ship was sinking or whatever. And the lady that I had taken back in the past life had gotten off the ship, but she'd lost all her belongings. So it could be the same event, but they've obviously had very different experiences and therefore different patterns or beliefs or behaviors or whatever it was have carried into their current lifetime. So it could be the same event, but multiple people obviously were at that event, but we can all have a different experience of the same thing. We're not all having the same experience. So I thought that was really interesting. Anyway, let's talk about a current client reading I did just last week with a beautiful client who had done all of my Akashic Records training. So she'd done levels 1, 2, and 3 with me. And I'm sharing this little sort of story with her permission. So I really appreciate that because I feel like within this, again, I share these stories because they're not about her. They're about you, the collective. But also, if you hear a piece from her story that resonates with you, then hopefully it will help something else unfold. And also I felt like some of the themes that were coming through when I was channeling within the records felt really important for this time. It felt really important for the healers and the energy workers of this time. And it really felt like quite a call to them. And it also gave us some more information on how to manage the energy and how to avoid burnout. So if that is something that you have struggled with, definitely listen up. All right. So the main issues that she came with for the reading were that she was unclear on her direction and vision for the future. So she'd also felt quite disconnected from her energy work, and she'd actually while she had built quite a successful energy work and business with different modalities, the Akashic Records being one of them, she hadn't been working in her business for a couple of years. She'd actually turned off social media altogether. Even though she sort of knew that working with the records and doing readings and coaching for people was her sort of soul work, she had gone back to corporate, which is totally fine, totally understandable. She needed that change. So we wanted to obviously dive in, see what was going on. And one of the first questions, if she's been offline for 2 years, I actually had a quick look back on her socials, and you could see the sort of when's 2 years ago, but sort of June, I can't even remember the year, was it 21, 22? She had just stopped everything from her business. She'd had sort of quite a lot of good publicity and whatnot, and it had just stopped overnight. So I wanted to obviously know what happened 2 years ago. She'd had a big move physically to another city, which was part of it. But I asked her some more questions, so I wanted to check what was really going on with the spiritual work. What had happened? Had there been something specific that had happened that had caused her to shut it down? So, had she had any kind of bad experiences with a client, anything with sort of weird, funky energy? But no, that it hadn't been anything like that. She'd had some lovely, lovely clients. So that wasn't one of them. And but then she mentioned that she felt really drained after holding her women's circles or doing energy work sessions with people. And she felt like the amount of energy that she was giving out, she hadn't been charging enough to really compensate herself for the amount of energy she was using, and she was finding it exhausting. And so she was exhausted, she was frustrated. And really, what happened was she had gone into self-preservation mode. She had just said, nope, can't do it. I'm going to fully burn out here if I carry on like this. I need to sort of stabilize things. And that's exactly what she'd done by going and getting a corporate job. And there is absolutely no shame in doing that. If you need to, do that, pay the bills, give yourself a break, absolutely do it. And if you are, we'll get into this later on, but if you are thinking of starting a business, you don't need to quit your job to start it. You can do it gradually, and we'll talk about that later on as well. So there is no right or wrong way in doing all of this stuff. You've got to do what works for you, for your family, and manage your inner energy. So, but with all this, the sad thing was that she was really beating herself up for it. She was sort of frustrated and angry and sort of quite cynical, and kind of like, I'd given it a shot and it hasn't worked, and blah blah. She was not feeling it. And the other thing was, she couldn't really see how it could be any different in the future. So she was sort of having this reading with me. I don't know if it was quite a last resort, but she also knew though that she couldn't continue in her corporate job. She's like, this is like, the words she used were killing her. And when I was in my corporate job, I certainly felt like it was, at some points at the beginning, it was sort of killing me emotionally, then spiritually, and then at the end, physically. So I totally could relate to that. I was like, I cannot be here in even another year, in 5 years, and like looking forward 30 years. I was like, oh my God, I cannot be here. Something has to change. So while she didn't feel like she didn't see how things could change to be able to run her spiritual business, she also knew she couldn't stay in corporate. So she was kind of feeling this stuck place in between the two parts, because she's like, well, if things aren't going to be different, like, what's going to change, kind of idea. So she booked the session with me, and one of the beautiful things about the records is we can sort of see this higher perspective piece, which is always, it sort of takes us out of the spinning and the beating ourselves up, or the looping around in thought patterns, because she was really, really looping in that energy of it didn't work. It's not going to work again. How can it be different? I can't see it being different. I've done all this work, but why is it not working for me? And sort of in this thought loop. And I could just see it, visually, I could see it just looping and looping and looping in a circle. I could see this sort of spiral she was in, that she sort of couldn't break free of the thought pattern. And so obviously that's why she reached out to me. So so she had a bit of a dilemma going on, right? As you can imagine. So, of course, we open the records, and, we pose pose the questions and see how we can help her the most in the shortest amount of time, which is always one of the intentions that I set. So one of the reasons that she'd felt not good charging for the work, or not feeling like she could restart the work and charge as well, was that she felt like she had failed in some way, or that she had, like, some of the work hadn't worked for her. So there was a sort of a moral dilemma. She maybe didn't feel that, like, if I've done all this work and it hasn't worked for me, like, can I keep selling sessions? What if it doesn't help them? So that was quite a valid concern to have. But realistically, when we go deeper, there was a more of a story going on, and it wasn't really true, as it were, and that the work she had done had been very impactful and had, helped a lot of people. Her experience she was having was separate from that, but there was a lot more going on underneath that, and we sort of went deeper, and we got a few more layers deeper. And I won't go into that because I actually can't exactly remember what was happening when we went into that. I was quite deep in the channeling of it, and I haven't actually gone back to listen to the whole episode or the whole reading itself. I just was this is from memory and also handwritten notes that I took, so I didn't go back in and listen to that, but there was quite a lot came through around that and going deeper. And there was a story she was telling herself, but it wasn't really the story. And we went into all that, and then the next part that felt really important was I shared a different way that I had been opening the records, and that made a lot of sense to her. And it just was another layer for her to add on some more protection going into the records, and then another layer of protection when she was closing the records. So that had come through for me when I was also in a reading, because I used to get quite drained from doing this work as well. And I will share another reason for that in just a second. So, this, so that was obviously quite a helpful add-on. And that's something I actually went in and recorded a whole episode about, and shared it with people in the course. So that was a good reminder for me to add that in to the course as well, so people would have that information. So sometimes this stuff is coming through for her, but also for the collective as well, which was really beautiful. The other thing that was important in that moment to remind her in terms of managing her energy, making sure she's not drained by the records, was grounding as much as possible before she opens her records, after she has her records open, which is something I teach in my course, but it's always nice to be reminded of these things. And the amount, when you open the Akashic Records, you're opening a really high vibrational portal of energy. So it is, I mean, the vibration of the energy that's coming through is so high. Like, we are, as I've talked about, I did a whole episode just on grounding, so I won't go into it now. Or there's also a beautiful grounding meditation, so definitely check that out. But we are so, when you open the records, there's so much energy coming through, it can fry you, like literally fry you. And so that's why grounding is really important. But also and I used to also tell my clients and people in my course, make sure you're hydrated. So I tell that to anyone that I do a reading with, because it doing a reading sort of stirs up a lot. You heal a lot of trauma, but it sort of mobilizes toxins in your system. So it's a bit like a detox, and you want to drink a ton of water to help get everything moving and flushing all that stuff out of your system after a session. It's a bit like if you've been for a massage, there's a lot of stuff moving around your body. They always tell you to drink lots of water. Or if you've been for Reiki or acupuncture or any of those things, you always come out and you want to drink a lot of water to get things flushed through your system. So the same thing with the Akashic Records. I always taught that, but the thing that seemed really important was also to add in the electrolytes. So what I sort of realized when I was in this reading, which seems really silly, is that the electrolytes, if you break down that word, look at the, what it's called, it's etymology of the word, electrolyte is obviously from electricity. And so it's the electricity in our cells that produce so it's the electrolytes, so the salt, the potassium, the magnesium, all that kind of stuff, allow our cells to conduct energy and electricity, and then you have more energy. So if you get depleted of the electrolytes when you're running all of this high vibrational energy through your system, then you can be quite depleted and quite dehydrated. So I have always, again, like I said, I've always told people to drink lots of water, but now I'm telling you, drink lots of water and take lots of Celtic sea salt as well. So Celtic sea salt's full of 82 essential minerals, including magnesium, interestingly enough. So I have been doing that a lot. I tell people to do it. I mentioned it in the grounding episode. But here's where it gets even more interesting for me. So we're going to skip forward for a moment. That night after the reading, I woke up, or I would like to say I was woken up by spirit in the middle of the night, and I must have fallen asleep listening to a podcast. So I woke up and I heard the words, something along these lines: spiritual and psychic work depletes the body of magnesium. And I was like, and then I fell asleep again. So I didn't even know at the time when I woke up what podcast it was on, who'd said it, and what was she talking about. And but I just remembered those words, and I was like, oh my goodness. So I reached out to my client and I said, hey, I know we talked yesterday about grounding, we talked about electrolytes, we talked about, different ways to open and close your records. I just heard this in the middle of the night. I think spirit woke me up to tell me that spiritual and psychic work depletes the body of magnesium. And she was like, oh my gosh, of course. Like, I've actually been taking magnesium, but not consistently. So I will make sure I do that. And it kind of just blew my mind. I don't remember anything else. Normally when I listen to podcasts, if I'm falling asleep to listening to one, I set it to turn off at the end of the episode. And I obviously, maybe I did it, maybe I didn't. But I've also had experiences where spirit has played a podcast for me when I haven't pressed play. And so I feel like this was one of these examples where they sort of woke me up in that exact moment to hear those words, to be able to remind you when you were doing your spiritual, psychic, and energy work that you need to manage your magnesium levels. Now, things that if you are depleted of magnesium, then you can end up having a heart attack. So it can cause heart palpitations. The obvious ones we know are like muscle cramps and things like that, but it can also obviously cause fatigue and a whole bunch of other things. So if you're doing tons of spiritual work, you're not replenishing your electrolytes and specifically your magnesium, of course you're going to feel drained. Of course you're going to feel exhausted, and you're not going to feel like you can deliver the number of readings or sort of maintain this spiritual work in the short term, and definitely not the long term, if your body is just exhausted and crying out for these electrolytes. So I just find that so interesting. And I just felt like people need to know. I feel like you need to know. And if you've heard it, maybe I wrote a Facebook post on this. If you haven't read that, or maybe you have read it, you need to hear it again, right? Get yourself some really good magnesium. If you're doing this work, of course. But I feel like at this point on the planet, with the amount of electrical current stuff that is happening, everybody needs to be taking Celtic sea salt, right? It lowers your blood pressure. It's fabulous. Regular iodized salt causes inflammation, causes, issues, reduces your, I talked about this on another podcast, but the Celtic sea salt actually enters your cells and is actually beneficial. So definitely get yourself some Celtic sea salt. I like the Selena light grey one. It's the one that Barbara O'Neill recommends. And in terms of magnesium, I'll pop a link in the show notes. I love Magnesium Breakthrough. It is a brilliant combination of like 7 different magnesiums and really covers your bases. So I will put that in the show notes as well, a link for you. So check that out. They're all different types, but I think this is a really, really good one. The one that I've been using. So it made sense to me. It just made sense. And another flashback. I'm still talking about this client, but I'm going to flash back again to something else that happened. A couple of years ago, I was doing my live event in San Diego. It was a 3-day seminar thing. There was about 100 women there. And on the last day, I was doing this sort of mass group healing thing. I think trying to over deliver a little bit. My old, this was maybe 2017. So still a little bit of people pleaser vibes going on maybe, and trying to over deliver for people that had come all the way to San Diego for the event. And I was doing this mass healing and taking everybody from feeling not good enough to good enough through the records. And I'd never done it on such a big scale. I'd done sort of that kind of work for clients remotely, which have been very, very effective, but I'd never done it on such a big scale. And so it was a bit of an experiment. I like to try things. I call myself a bit of a crash test dummy sometimes. But if you've never done it, you don't know, right? So I thought, well, I've done it for my clients and my smaller groups. Why not? Anyway, so I'm on stage, I do the healing, and came off, and it was quite profound. Everyone was like, oh my God. And I got off and I just about collapsed into my friend's arms who was there supporting me at the event. And in hindsight, I had probably run far too, especially day 3 of an event, you've been on the go. We had all sorts of things going on at that event. We had a sound healing, we had a big VIP dinner, we had flamethrowers, we had speakers and sponsors and all this kind of stuff. It was a huge deal. I'd also run a mastermind event in the 4 days leading up to this 3-day live summit. I mean, absolute madness. And then I ran another 2-day mastermind after the event for group program members. I mean, it was, looking back, totally insane to think that I could manage that amount of work, energy work, as well as holding space and not be exhausted or collapse, and then try and do this ridiculous healing. So talk about over delivering. But in hindsight, I was probably dehydrated, was definitely not taking on any kind of Celtic sea salt, and my magnesium was probably just totally wiped out, and that caused me to sort of collapse off the stage. Anyway, we digress. So anyway, make sure if you're doing live events or any kind of mastermind work, you are guzzling the Celtic sea salt and magnesium. I will not make that mistake again. So I actually take magnesium every night. Helps me sleep, and obviously it's good in all the other ways. So the other awareness I had, I was like, oh, maybe this explains my extreme chocolate cravings. So quite often you'll find that if spiritual workers, not everybody, but quite often psychics and people like that, they are bigger. So I'm not a skinny girl, I'm, curvy. And I was sort of thinking about this, and often what happens when you have so much energy pulsing through you, your body is trying to ground itself naturally. So sometimes by being bigger, your body sort of expands to be able to hold the energy, but also to ground you in a way. And I was sort of like, oh, I wonder if that's because like psychics and spiritual people, they're not grounding themselves, so their bodies feel like they have to, and they're eating a whole ton of chocolate because they're trying to get the magnesium. So their bodies are sort of intuitively knowing what they're trying to do, but they're doing it in the sort of in the way that they can in the way that they can kind of figure out. So I thought that was interesting, because I was like, I do crave chocolate. But one of the things I've added as well in the last couple of years that made a big difference is I drink quite a bit of high quality ceremonial grade cacao. And it's one of the highest natural sources of magnesium. And I thought, I wonder if that's why I've been craving that so much. And it's obviously popular in spiritual circles and all that kind of stuff. And then I read on the bag that I have at the moment, it says on it that the Mayans called what we call cacao, cacao, and they called it the food of the gods. And I thought that was really interesting that they knew, perhaps, that obviously cacao is replenishing their magnesium stores, and maybe it was allowing them to literally connect with spirit better or for more prolonged periods of time and run that energy because their body was getting what they needed from the cacao. And that's why they call it the food of the gods, perhaps. I don't know. So I thought that was really interesting. And actually, ironically, while I'm sitting here talking to you, I have a cacao. All right. So, yeah, so that was a little bit of a tangent, but anyway, so definitely hydration at the moment with the amount of energy on the planet between the Schumann resonance and these solar flares is bananas. I was listening to another slight aside, Pam Gregory, my favorite astrologer. She is so calming, so wise. I just love her. And she was saying that these solar flares are on a sort of exponential scale, and they go up a bit like the Richter scale. They go up in intensity according to the alphabet. So sort of like she said in 20, I think it was 17 or 18, there were 0 solar flares more than an M happened the whole year. And this year, on one day, there were, oh gosh, were there 3 or 13? You know, my stats are never ideal, but something like 3 or 13 X class. I think in one day there was 3 X class flares, which is obviously up the high end of the alphabet. So really intense flares in one day. And there had been like 13 in a month or something like that. So considering there were absolutely none in 2017, 18, that intense. And then, fast forward 7 years or so, we're getting, triple the amount in one day. So, if I was depleted of magnesium back in 2017 doing that work, I can't even imagine what my body would allow me to do now if I tried to do that without replenishing it with this, with these nutrients that my body was obviously needing and craving back then. And now I just have this slightly more deep awareness of what is necessary. All right. So the other thing, again, I talked about, I think in the grounding episode, is the importance of good water, filtered water. I drink Kangen water, and it is hydrogen water. And so the hydrogen in the water, you'll see a lot of people talking about it. They've got different machines and water bottles and things to make hydrogen water nowadays that are coming out, and it is really fabulous for your hydration and all the stuff we've been talking about. So if you can get a high quality water in you, very important. I would also stock up on some spare bottled water just in case. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. So have at least a week's worth on hand. Okay, so back to the reading. My client, we went into a process to clear whatever was going on for her, get her some clarity. And as we went into the process, she felt like she had this sort of static, like on a TV, if you're on a radio, if you're not tuned into the station, you just get that white noise, the static. And so when she tuned into her third eye, she was feeling the static. That was all she was getting. Like she wasn't connected to spirit anymore. Her sort of fear, her burnout, her turning off, it felt like she turned off her connection to spirit and her dial. She felt a little bit let down, I suppose, and she wasn't tuned in. So she had lost her spiritual dial-up code or channel. And one of the phrases she used was that she felt like she'd literally blown a fuse, which again, if you overdose on the electrical stuff and you don't have the circuitry in place, you're going to blow a fuse. So again, all of this being really relevant to how she felt. So as we carried on, we worked through the process, bringing her more into alignment. Her energy was shifting. And funnily enough, she saw an image of a tuning fork when we were in this process. And I said, "Oh, I just so happen to have. You mean one like this?" And I pulled up the tuning fork that sits on my desk, and it is tuned to the vibration of love, 528 hertz. And it was obviously a sign for us to use that. And so we used the energy of the tuning fork, and that sound was able to harmonize her frequency and really drop her deeper into her heart. So away from the staticky, getting out of her head, back into her body, back into her heart. And as we were there, this really deep, ancient sadness came up. It just felt so old. It wasn't a specific, we weren't in a specific past life, but the energy was ancient. And some emotion came up for her, and the words that she brought through were feeling forsaken, feeling failed by spirit. And it felt like that energy had been in a past life as well. Although she didn't see specifics of that lifetime. You don't need to see specifics. It can literally, we're always focused on the energy, the feelings, the emotions. When I get specifics of the past life, like the Titanic story, to me that's interesting, but it's not the important part. We want the feelings, the lessons, and that's the important bit. The rest of it, the Titanic, the story is cool, but it's not the most important part, if you know. But I'm always up for hearing what that is, because I think it's great to demonstrate an idea, but you don't need to see something specific like that to get the lesson, to feel the feelings, and to get the healing and move on. So we let all that energy be felt, be seen, and we cleared it. We worked through some stuff. And the feeling that she had after that was that she was really exactly where she was supposed to be without so much heaviness, which was great. Then as we were going through the process, she saw images of water flowing. So I was obviously, my curiosity peaks because I'm all about flow, and this is the flow show. And the awareness she had was that her body was made of water, and to allow energy to flow, water can't be stagnant. Oh, how profound. And that's so true, right? It's very, she was in a sense, I guess, stagnant in her corporate role. She wasn't energy in motion, she wasn't moving. So nothing was really happening. The energy couldn't flow because she was stuck. So sort of, I guess what we did was we removed the stagnancy to allow the energy to flow again. And then the other image she saw was that we were all, because we were water, we were all connected through this DNA spiral. And because of the way it was replicating, we all have the same particles in existence of our DNA. And so she realized in that moment, like she could see it viscerally and feel it, that because we are all one and all connected through this spiral of DNA, that she could not be forsaken, because she was all one with spirit and everything else. And so that forsakenness energy wasn't real. It couldn't be there. So we moved through that, which was beautiful. And as we closed up the process, I wanted to know, I sort of always in a process when I'm closing it up, I sort of go back to the beginning. I want to know that where we started is different, right? We want to sort of close the process off, as it were. So as we sort of came back to the beginning, and she tuned back in again, the static was gone. And instead of feeling all that frantic kind of not on the channel, the image that she saw this time instead was that she had an antenna on her head. So going from static, she literally had this etheric antenna tuned directly back into source and back, and her connection was sort of restored, her spiritual connection, which was beautiful, right? And I love the imagery. Again, that's not always the case, but in this case, it kind of made sense with the journey we'd been on. And then for me, what came through then, that had been sort of her process, and then there was some deep channeling that was sort of coming through me to remind her as well, on top of what she'd learned within her process. Just one second. What I became very aware of in the records was that these last 2 years for her, she had felt obviously like she was a failure, or she had been failed by spirit. And obviously, we are exactly where we're supposed to be. And if she had supposed to be working all of that time with clients doing her spiritual work, she would have been, right? Ultimately, if it was supposed to be, it would have been, right? There's an element, yes, of we can change things, but also your path is your path, and there's some things that we can't fight. We can't make it happen if it's not supposed to happen in that time, right? So there's this, which is coming back into the flow, right? If we're sort of going against where the flow is taking us, or where the energy is taking us, then it creates more resistance and makes everything harder. So the deep awareness, she knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be, but the reminder that came through was really that she's been in a preparation space. So she needed to prepare for what's coming, right? We are coming into this time with all of this energy, with all of this movement happening. It is going to be an explosive year, right? We've sort of touched on it a little bit. If you want more of that, definitely check out Pam Gregory. I love her. But this is going to be a year of awakening, a year of spiritual awakening, a year of revolution. And there's going to be a lot going on. And so there's going to be a lot of people asking questions, needing help, needing spiritual work, needing healers, needing coaches, all of that good stuff. So this work is going to be particularly potent and needed in the next months, years, up to sort of 2030 and beyond. So this is very, very important work. And it's all like the message coming through was that she was in preparation mode. If she carried on the way she was without some of this information, without the new process, without the, knowing about the magnesium and the electrolytes, she would have fully burnt out and wouldn't have been ready for now. And a lot of us have been in a sort of cocoon, in a pause moment, resting and recovering in preparation for now. The energy has changed. Maybe you can feel the momentum. We've been in quite a what's the word? Contained energy over the last few years. It felt quite constrained and quite tight is the energy I would describe it. And now it is like mode on, go time. Now is the time. So if you are an emerging coach, healer, whatever you do, you are needed right now. And so we've got to just let go feeling bad for having had a quieter couple of years, and be ready for what's coming, and ready to really step fully into our purpose and our soul's work, and why we have been prepared already. So I don't know if I've mentioned this already at some point, maybe I have, but maybe I said this to the client, I can't remember, I've said it recently, but in a very privileged position to have had 15, 20, maybe 30 years of preparation time for this. I had my first sort of, I used to have, I was aware of spiritual things as a child. I had dreams. I saw my first entities and visitations of things when I was about 14. That's a whole nother story. I sort of shut down my spiritual gift then. I'll maybe tell that story another time. But really in my early 20s, I started having an awakening. Started with the physical, started with my friend had cancer. And so these were little things that started opening my mind, and I really did my first major sort of past life work when I was at the very beginning, when I was 30. So things had started shifting before, but that was when I did, and I'm 43, right? So I've been in this work, doing these deep explorations and, spiritual work for 13 years, if that's where you kind of count it from. But I feel like it's been, my preparation's been a bit longer than that. But it has been gradual. I get snippets of information, I take it in, I'm like, oh my God, oh, okay. And then the next thing opens my mind, and I'm like, oh, wow, all right, wow. And if I didn't know the other thing, and it's been this gradual awareness and awakening to these different pieces of the puzzle, as it were. And I'm lucky I've had that amount of time to digest this stuff, right? To do the healings, to get the awarenesses. Because I think this next period of time, people are going to be slammed awake. I don't know how. I don't know what's going to happen, but I feel like it's, I've had all this time and like, da 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 da, and like it's come gradually, and I've followed the breadcrumbs, and off I've gone, and I've done the next healing, and I've gone to the next retreat, and I've tried the plant medicine stuff, and I went to this other healer, right? Beautiful journey, like so grateful and so happy that I've been on this beautiful journey. But it's been, I've had my time to recover and integrate in between, and then off I go to the next person. And people, I feel like, are going to be slammed awake in the next couple of years. So it's going to be a shock to the system for some people. They're going to need people who have an awareness of what's going on to guide them through this time. And it's going to be quite confronting for some people, but also they're going to get to the same kind of spiritual level of awareness that some of us already have in a couple of months, right? They're just going from 0 to 100, and we all end up with this sort of, like I've said before, there's no hierarchy anymore. So it's taken me, and I felt like I was on quite an accelerated journey in those 13 years or whatever. But people are going to get to the same level as me in months, maybe days, maybe weeks. I don't know how fast, but they're going to be like, boom, right? We're all at the same place very quickly. So anyway, right, we digress. Okay, so this feeling of, if you have been in rest and recover mode, that's okay, right? We're making a comeback, and we're seeing a lot of people online as well. There's a lot of talk in the coaching industry of people that have just disappeared. Do you ever think of somebody and be like, I wonder whatever happened to so-and-so? They were active on social media, they seemed really successful, and I'm like, God, I haven't seen that person in ages. And I go and I like look up their account because it's just not showing up anywhere, and I'm like, they haven't posted for like 4 years. They've just like poof, disappeared into the ethers. So, and there have been people that have been, in business from the beginning, like I have, or the beginning, but like a solid 10 years, who haven't taken a break, and they are burnt out and exhausted and lighting their businesses on fire. I'm seeing a lot of that. And so it's this feeling of, if you have had a break, it might be just the thing that actually supports your longevity going forward. And, we have this resurgence of momentum now to go again. So don't feel like it's been a failure in any way. Okay, let's finish this off. So back to the reading, she asked me if she should just quit her job. Now, I mentioned at some point that I would never tell anybody to do that. Oh yeah, the episode when this girl was like, you told me to quit my job, and I said, no, I did not. But she wanted to know if she should just take another trust fall into her business. I think those were the words she used. She's like, should I just go for it again, quit my job, and just see what happens? And I said, let's look at both sides, because that's what we do. So when I see the energy of these kind of things, I can sort of see the outcomes. I get a feeling in my body. I sometimes hear things. And the question that I was sort of asking within the records was, has enough changed that she could take that level of risk and just quit her job? Is that something that would be beneficial for her in this time? And the message that came back was that it just felt at this point too overwhelming for her nervous system. So the message that they said, look, if it doesn't if she dived right in this second time and it didn't work out for whatever reason, it's unlikely she would have the oomph to try a third comeback. So it felt risky, it felt stressful. It felt like if she quit her job and her source of income, then that feeling of scarcity might kick in again. And it just felt kind of rushed. It didn't feel good. So on the other side, again, she can choose to do whatever she wants, but when we can kind of look at these outcomes, it makes a big difference. On the other side, it felt very important to do a reframe on her current job. So as much as she wanted to pack in and hand her notice in tomorrow, it felt like instead of sort of resenting it, hating it, feeling like it was stopping her doing her soul work, we were like, what if you can, while you are still in it, can you have gratitude and allow yourself to feel supported by it? Like literally, like this is the container supporting me in my transition to start to work with clients again. So when we sort of fell into that, it's like, could she maybe do 1 or 2 clients a week on top of her corporate job, build up, get her trust back for herself, get her confidence back in her work again, transition more slowly. And when I fell into that option, my whole body just was like, oh, I just felt this deep exhale. It felt good. It felt clear that felt like a much, much more supportive way of coming back into this work for her. So the message is, while I used to talk about, I don't have a plan B, this is it, burn the bridges, that is okay if your nervous system is fully intact and you are, in a really good, energized place, you have savings and funds and whatever, you can do that. Great, carry on. But it's not necessary to put everything on the line to follow your soul's path. It's just not. There is no failure in having, like I said earlier, a transition job, a part-time job, whatever you need to do to support yourself, to feel like, you have that underlying support, so as you're not totally stressing your nervous system out even more than is necessary. So the last piece of the puzzle, she asked me if her vision was the right vision. So sometimes we think we know what we want. Sometimes I've had clients who have no idea what they want, which is the sort of other end of the spectrum, and which is totally fine too. But often what we'll do is we'll go into one of these processes, we'll do a big clearing, and then at the end of the process, the vision sort of emerges and suddenly becomes clear. And it's really cool. So sometimes it's just really muddy. Maybe there's been fear or stuff sort of blocking that vision, and we can clear it and the vision becomes clear. So she had a vision, but she went, oh, is that it? If she hadn't questioned it, we might not have looked at it. But she was like, actually, is my vision the vision? So I was able to tune in, and her vision was to have a women's retreat center, sanctuary place, and live in it. And the question was, is that really for her? Is that really what she's aiming for? Is that what she wants? So the energy felt quite distant and sort of unachievable. And when I looked at that, it had been when I saw that, I could see the timelines, and the timeline for her a couple of years ago when she was running her business, it looked as far away for her as, she was 2 years in theory closer to her vision happening, but the timeline kept jumping away. So it felt like the further along she got, she didn't actually get any closer to her vision, if that makes sense. And it just kept sort of bouncing further and further away, it just wasn't getting any closer. So that was fine. So I tuned into what the vision could be. So looked at the highest timeline, and I could clearly see this beautiful round retreat center. It was perched high in the hills, quite a sort of dry area, I guess you could say. And I could sort of see this beautiful retreat center sort of high above everything, sort of taking this, as Pam Gregory would say, the eagle's view of things. And I had a beautiful vision of that once when I was in a ceremony, and I was actually not just up high in a valley, but I was sort of perched on the edge of existence, looking down. It was really cool. So she's got this eagle's view up in the retreat center, and so there's sort of chaos happening below, but it had that really beautiful, serene energy. But the message that came through was, one, she didn't live there. It was really important that she didn't live there. And two, it wasn't just her that owned it. So the original vision was she lived there, she owned it on her own, and then held space for all these women to come. And it was like, oh no, that's not what you want anymore. So the image I got was a circle, a community coming together to support each other in holding circles and retreats. So it was the sense that there was no place for a single person to be holding space for big circles. That was kind of like the old way. And the new way they showed me was circles holding space for circles. So a circle is actually a really strong energy, right? It's a strong structure. There's no kinks in it, right? So this vision was the circle holding space for circles. And as I looked at the timeline for that, the vision and this timeline when it was activated was much, instead of jumping further and further away and being distant and feeling unachievable, it felt like it was so much faster. It felt like, oh, doing this in a circle, doing this as part of a community, you can have it much faster. So instead of this being this 10-year kind of distant vision that kept getting further and further away, it was current. It was like it could happen in the next year or two. Like it felt really good, really present, and really possible, which was beautiful. And it felt, again, this beautiful exhale I was able to take, and it felt really, really good. The other thing about not living in the retreat center was that she needed to be separate from the amount of energy and things that were swirling around in that space. And she needed to have a real sanctuary away from that. Not a million miles away, but just not in it, not having to be there and hold space for other people all the time. It's quite, again, it's managing her energy and allowing her this sort of escape to be there when she's there and to be really off when she's not there. So again, that feels like a theme going forward for people. I think a lot of people have a vision of having their own retreat center, but I feel like more and more people are going to realize that how much that takes from you, and more people are going to be much more open to doing it together. So I'd be curious to know if that's something that you had envisioned, or if that has been changing for you in the way that you see it. But it feels much, much better being a collaboration, a collective. So at the end of our session, she felt much lighter and clearer and just excited for everything happening. And it was different, like at the beginning, she couldn't see a way that it could be different for her. And so she didn't really see a way of being able to move forward. But suddenly she was able to see how it could be different and would be different going forward. And that was such a relief. And so it's really opened up so much. And I got some beautiful messages from her saying she was super grateful for the work we'd done. And she said it was absolutely magnificent to connect, and for such a magical session. And she feels so different. And that is why I love doing what I do, because her work, again, if I can get her back into her spiritual connection, back into alignment, she then goes out and helps a whole bunch of people, and they go out and help more people. And, you know, it has this beautiful knock-on effect, you know. Right. So, yeah, I think that is all I'm going to share about that. We've had a few tangents, but that is okay. If you are interested in working with me, I will leave links below in the show notes. You're welcome to book a free consultation if you want to work with me one-on-one for spiritual business coaching. If you want a one-off reading, they are currently open, although doing some work myself over what my offerings are going to look like going forward, I might just close them. So they are currently open. It felt, again, for some reason important to open them for now, but I might turn that off again at some point. So there's a few different offerings open at the moment. One of them being a half VIP day called an Akashic Business Review, where we can just review all of your systems and offerings and what's going on with the energetics and beliefs and all that kind of stuff. That's a really beautiful, I hate the word potent, but it's very potent process. So that's an option. And then levels 1 and 2 of the Akashic Records are available to dive in for immediate learning. All of the downloads are there, workbooks, the calls, and everything is in there if you feel like learning how to open the records for yourself, which is level 1, or stepping into doing readings for other people and integrating it into your work. So beautiful trainings. I'll put some information about that below. If you have any questions, please reach out. Happy to answer any questions about that. And I will see you in the next episode. Oh, and one last thing. If you know anybody who needs to hear this message, please share it. I would love if you share it in your stories. I will share it as well in mine. And if you would I would love you to leave a review. If you go to the About section in your podcast app, you can see there's a little thing that has the stars, and you can just click on that and leave a review. That would be much, much appreciated. And yeah, reach out, let me know. Are you feeling this? What are you getting from it? Have you got any revelations? Let me know. I would love to hear your experience. If you're being called places to do planetary grid work, where are you going? What is happening? What is opening up for you? Yeah, I love to hear it. Makes it feel like even more of a conversation and not me just talking at you. So yeah, let me know. I would love to hear. All right, take care.